Most people think surveillance in the UK is simple. They imagine a secret room, a few intelligence officers, a wall of screens, and a big red button that lets the government tap your phone. But the real system is nothing like that. In the UK, surveillance is not one activity, it is not one organisation, and it is not one technology. It is a legal and technical machine built across telecom networks, internet services, government authorisation, judicial oversight, and compliance systems that most people never see. It runs quietly in the background. And it exists because modern life is digital. People call, text, use encrypted messaging, use cloud services, stream video, move money, work remotely, and coordinate across borders. If the UK wants to investigate serious crime or protect national security, it needs lawful ways to access some of that information. But here is the key point. In the UK, surveillance is not just about power, it is also about constraints. Because the UK system is designed to balance three things that constantly fight each other: public safety, national security, and civil liberties. And the entire lawful interception system is basically the UK's attempt to build a permanent structure that can hold that balance under pressure. In this video, I'm going to explain how UK surveillance and lawful interception actually work. Not as a conspiracy, not as a slogan, but as a real operating model. We'll look at what the Investigatory Powers Act actually is, what lawful interception really means, what types of surveillance exist in UK law, how telecom networks and internet providers implement interception capability in principle, how authorisation works, who signs what oversight exists, what happens when something goes wrong, and why the UK's approach is different from the US and from many European countries. I'm going to do this with UK-specific detail and realistic examples, because if you want to understand UK surveillance properly, you need to understand the UK system, not generic American assumptions. Before we start, here is the simplest mental model. The UK lawful interception system has three layers. Layer 1 is the communications infrastructure: telecom networks, internet service providers, cloud services, messaging platforms, and the technical capability to provide data when legally required. Layer 2 is legal authority and authorization. This is the part that decides whether access is allowed, under what power, for what purpose, and with what limits. Layer 3 is oversight and accountability. This is the part that audits, reviews, inspects, and investigates whether the system is being used properly. The key point is this: in the UK, lawful interception is not meant to be free surveillance. It is meant to be controlled access under law with documented purpose and with oversight. Now, whether the balance is correct is a political debate, but the existence of the structure is not a mystery. It is a designed system. Quick note before we go deeper. If you want UK tech explained properly, not generic US takes, subscribe. This channel is building a UK-only map of digital infrastructure, payments, identity, government systems, national resilience, defence, cybersecurity, and how the UK's institutions actually work. To understand UK surveillance, you have to drop two common misunderstandings. Misunderstanding number 1. People assume surveillance means listening to content. In reality, a huge portion of surveillance is about metadata. Who contacted who, when, from where, using which device, and how often. Metadata is often more valuable than content because content is messy and metadata is structured. Misunderstanding number 2. People assume surveillance is one thing, but the UK system has multiple categories: interception, equipment interference, communications data, bulk powers, targeted powers, and different rules apply to each. So, if you want to understand lawful interception, you have to treat it like a legal and technical taxonomy, not one activity. The Investigatory Powers Act, often called the IPA. This is the UK's main framework for investigatory powers. It exists because the UK needed a modern legal structure that reflects modern communications: phones, internet services, cloud, encryption, cross-border infrastructure, and a world where communications are not controlled by a few UK telecom companies, but by global platforms. The IPA defines what powers exist, who can use them, what authorisation is required, what safeguards apply, and what oversight mechanisms must exist. And it tries to do something very difficult. It tries to create a system that is operationally usable for investigators while still being legally constrained and still being reviewable by oversight bodies. Now I'm going to give you a human opinion here. The IPA is often debated as if it is either a totalitarian surveillance law or a harmless technical update. It is neither. It is a serious set of powers. But it is also one of the most structured and audited surveillance frameworks in the world. That does not mean it is perfect, but it does mean it is not an unregulated free-for-all. To understand the UK system, you need to know the core categories. I'm going to describe them in plain English. First, interception. Interception is about capturing communications in transit. Traditionally, this meant phone calls, but it can also mean certain forms of internet traffic. Second, communications data. This is not content. It is data about communications. Subscriber information, connection records, routing, timing. Third, equipment interference. This is a category that relates to accessing data from devices. It is sometimes described as hacking, but in law it is framed as a controlled investigative power. Fourth, bulk powers. These are powers that involve large-scale collection under specific authorizations. They are controversial, but they exist because threat detection at national scale often requires pattern analysis. Fifth, retention. This is not surveillance by itself. It is the obligation for certain providers to retain certain data so that it can be accessed later under authorization. The point is not to debate each power here. The point is to understand that the UK system is built as a set of categories, each with different rules. And the biggest mistake people make is arguing about surveillance, as if it is one thing. Now we need to talk about the users, because in the UK not every organisation can use every power. The users include intelligence agencies, law enforcement, and certain public authorities. But the most important distinction is this: there is a difference between national security use and serious crime investigation. In the UK, the intelligence agencies include MI5 for domestic security, MI6 for foreign intelligence, GCHQ for signals intelligence and cyber. Law enforcement includes territorial police forces, specialist units, the National Crime Agency, and certain other bodies, the National Crime Agency. And then there are public authorities that may have limited access to certain types of communications data for specific purposes. Now, this is where the UK system is often misunderstood because people imagine the government as one actor. But in reality, these are separate institutions with separate roles, separate oversight, and separate operational cultures. Now let's get to the part that defines the UK approach: authorisation. In the UK, the system is designed around the idea that surveillance powers must be authorised, not casually, not informally, but through documented processes. At a high level, authorisation involves a request, a justification, a legal basis, a necessity test, a proportionality test, and an approval. The key principle is this: the UK system is designed to ensure that intrusive powers are not used casually. They are supposed to be used when necessary and proportionate. Now, does that always happen perfectly? No, no human system does. But the UK has built a structure that tries to make abuse detectable and punishable. And that is where oversight comes in. If you want to understand the UK surveillance system, you need to understand oversight. Because oversight is not just a PR layer, it is an operational constraint. The UK has oversight structures that include judicial commissioners, the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, and other forms of parliamentary and legal oversight. The Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, often called IPCO, oversight exists to audit authorisations, inspect agencies, review compliance, investigate errors, and report publicly in aggregated form. Here is a key point. In the UK, a lot of surveillance debate happens without understanding that oversight exists. People argue as if there are no controls. But the UK system is built with controls, and those controls shape how the system is used. Now let's talk about the technical layer. This is where things get interesting, because lawful interception is not a magical tap. It is an engineering capability built into communications infrastructure. Telecom operators are complex. They run mobile networks, fixed broadband networks, core routing, authentication systems, billing systems, and interconnects. Lawful interception capability is not about a single wire. It is about the ability to provide specific types of data under lawful authority. At a conceptual level, telecom networks can provide call records, subscriber data, location-related data in some cases, and interception of certain communications where legally authorized. Now, I need to be very clear. I am not going to describe how to evade this, but I will explain the structural reality. Telecom interception capability is usually implemented through controlled interfaces, not by random people, not by rogue access. It is built as a compliance function and it is monitored. Because telecom operators themselves have legal obligations, and they face serious penalties if they fail. This is why lawful interception is often less about intelligence agencies hacking the network, and more about regulated providers fulfilling legal obligations under strict processes. Telecoms are one part, but the internet changed everything, because modern communications often do not run as simple phone calls. They run through WhatsApp, Signal, iMessage, Gmail, Google Drive, Microsoft 365, Telegram, Cloudflare, CDNs, VPNs, and countless other services. Many of these are not UK companies, many are global, and many use end-to-end encryption. So the UK system has to operate in a world where the infrastructure is international, the providers may not be UK-based, and the content may be encrypted. This is where lawful interception becomes less like wiretapping and more like legal and technical cooperation. This is also where the UK system intersects with something you've probably heard about: encryption debates. Encryption is the most controversial part of modern surveillance because encryption protects privacy, it protects commerce, it protects safety, but it also blocks investigation. The UK has tried to build a position that says we support strong encryption, but we also need lawful access in certain cases. The details of that debate are complex, but the key point for this video is simple. The UK lawful interception system is increasingly constrained not by law, but by technology. Because end-to-end encryption changes what is possible, and that pushes agencies toward metadata analysis, endpoint access in some cases, and other investigative techniques. Now, here is a human opinion. A lot of surveillance debate is framed as if governments are choosing between perfect privacy or total access. That is not reality. Reality is messy. The real trade-off is often between strong encryption that protects everyone and the investigative blind spots that criminals exploit. The UK system is basically a permanent attempt to manage that trade-off. Now we need to talk about the most boring but most important part: data retention. A huge amount of modern investigation relies on historical data, because crimes are not always detected instantly. So the UK has legal mechanisms that can require certain providers to retain certain categories of data. This is not content retention in most cases. It is usually communications data, metadata, subscriber records, connection logs. Retention is controversial, but without retention, many investigations become impossible. Because if the data is gone, it cannot be lawfully accessed later. This is why retention is one of the structural pillars of the UK system. Now, one of the biggest fears people have is mission creep, that surveillance powers will expand beyond their original purpose. The UK tries to prevent this through defined purposes, necessity and proportionality tests, specific authorisation pathways, and oversight auditing. Does this guarantee no mission creep? No, but it does create friction. And in governance, friction is often the difference between a controlled power and an uncontrolled one. No system is perfect. So what happens when lawful interception is misused or errors occur? In the UK model, errors are supposed to be reported internally, investigated, and reviewed through oversight mechanisms. And oversight bodies can issue findings. Again, this is not about claiming the system is perfect. It is about understanding that the UK has a designed accountability mechanism, and that mechanism is part of the system's legitimacy. Now, let's make this concrete with scenarios. Scenario 1, a terrorism investigation. A suspect is believed to be planning an attack. The UK system may use a mix of communications data, interception under authorisation, and intelligence-led assessment. The goal is not just to arrest, the goal is to prevent harm. Scenario 2, serious organised crime. A group is running drug trafficking and money laundering. Cyber tools are used, encrypted messaging is used. The UK system may rely heavily on communications data, financial intelligence, international cooperation, and targeted powers. Scenario 3, child exploitation investigations. These cases are among the most sensitive and legally constrained. They often require targeted authorization, strict oversight, and careful evidence handling. Scenario 4, cybercrime. A ransomware group targets UK organisations. The UK system may use disruption, infrastructure takedown efforts, international cooperation, and intelligence support. The key point is that in all these cases, the UK system is trying to operate under legal constraint, not as a free surveillance machine. Let's talk about comparison, because people often import American assumptions. In the US, surveillance powers are shaped by different legal traditions, different courts, different agencies, and different constitutional structures. The UK has its own model, more statute-driven, more centralised oversight structures, and a different relationship between telecom regulation and investigatory powers. The point is not that one is better. The point is that they are different. And you cannot understand UK lawful interception through American metaphors. Let's end with the practical takeaway. UK surveillance and lawful interception is not one activity. It is a structured system built across communications infrastructure, legal authorisation, and oversight. The UK system tries to balance public safety, national security, and civil liberties, and that balance is constantly contested. But the key thing to understand is this: modern digital life makes lawful interception both more necessary and more constrained. More necessary because crime and national security threats are digital. More constrained because encryption and global platforms change what is technically possible. So the UK's approach is evolving towards stronger oversight, more formal authorisation, more resilience-focused national security thinking, and a permanent debate about privacy. If you want the next logical piece of this puzzle, watch my video on how UK intelligence and national security systems actually work. Because lawful interception is not a standalone topic. It is one tool inside the UK's wider national security and resilience machine. And if you want UK tech explained properly, subscribe. This channel is building the full map,